Hello and welcome to the iTnews podcast, brought to you by NRI and the 2024 State of Data Report. I'm Ray Crozier, Editor-in-Chief of iTnews. Check out the inaugural State of Data Report on itnews.com.au, where we explore the trends that are driving data analytics through to the latest strategies for how data is stored and secured, and focus on the rapidly maturing disciplines of data governance and AI governance. But first, we hear from Ashley Taylor, who set up Flight Centre's dedicated voice of customer function and supporting technology, about the 2-year effort and the new data sources being tapped to make understanding customer sentiment even more precise.
It would be useful just to understand a bit about your role with the organisation, and specifically if you can talk maybe a little bit about voice of customer as a function or an internal domain, of how long it's been going and how it's evolved.
We didn't have a typical centralized voice of customer program until I started 2 years ago. So we've come from a position where we've got 5 businesses operating in different countries, doing their own thing and not really having a dedicated function to do that. So it's probably a little bit disjointed, slightly different metrics, slightly different approaches, not centralized. I was hired to build out the program and centralize it and have one methodology across all 5 countries.
Do you want to talk a little bit about when you came into the organisation, what the impetus was to bring all of the different voice of customer programs from across the Flight Centre Group together?
COVID was probably the impetus. It had a big impact on everyone across the world, our travel industry especially. It had a massive impact on Flight Centre. And while the organisation was coming to terms with COVID, one of the small sort of blessings from that is the ability to go back and look at your structures and your ways of operating and your processes and try to build back stronger so that when we come out the other side of COVID, I was more robust. It was identified that we wanted to globalize our functions with a sort of 80-20 approach, 80% globalized, 20% localized, so that we get all the benefits of same systems, same processes, same experience dealing with Flight Centre. And it was identified as part of that by our leadership team that we needed to also modernise and grow out CX functions and our VOC functions. That was really the impetus. So I joined in June 22, just as we were coming out of COVID and travel was about to start back up. It was really refreshing to be able to have that clean blank canvas to build the best program I could with the support of the business.
And was voice of customer within all 5 different businesses at that point when you joined?
It was, but not in anyone's official capacity. So in some places it was run by us customer care functions. It was coming from digital, some functions in some countries, it was coming from marketing. So what we really needed to do was really put a dedicated centralization to it so that we could have a dedicated resource to do it, to focus on it, to say that this is something that matters to the business. We want to be customer centric. We want to look after our customers. We want them to return to us based on having a good experience with us. So building back bigger, better and stronger through dedicated functions and just more thought through planning as well.
So you mentioned there were different metrics. Was there any commonality between the different businesses or even in the tooling?
A lot of people were using NPS and were using a CSAT, but it was at different points in the customer journey. It was operationalized differently through different wording, different ways of capturing it. We didn't necessarily have the most robust processes in place to capture that or to ensure that there's adequate sample at some of those points. So you could have very low sample responses from a typical NPS type response, but if your sample isn't robust enough, it can lead you down the wrong path.
So talk us through how you go about strategizing to bring all of these different functions or different aspects of voice of customer together.
There's a lot of co-design involved. So I came in with the remit to build a global program. So the first thing to do is to do an assessment of everything that is happening and in place and to work out ideally where do we need to be and then what do we need to do that. In my particular example, it was a case of going, okay, this is what we're all doing and this is a sort of good, useful efforts in place for what was happening, but what we could really do was just scale down and start again. None of the areas were too focused or had a dedicated CX platform, so it was very much on the fly, doing things themselves with some really lightweight tools. So the opportunity was really there just to go back and build afresh.
You mentioned that some of the implementations that were out in the organization were at different stages of the customer journey. Was the overall intent of those programs still the same though? So trying to understand sort of the intent and the preferences behind every customer engagement?
I think it was to an extent. ultimately that's what everyone's trying to do with it. I guess when you don't have a dedicated function like we do now, the focus isn't necessarily on that 100% of the time. So it's trying to collect feedback and trying to roll it in, but you don't have the processes and the guardrails and the governance to be able to make sure that all feedback comes in the same way, is analysed the same way, creates a set of outputs or insights that can go to where they need to be in the business.
Okay. So do you want to talk a little bit about where Qualtrics came into the picture?
We did have a relationship already within the corporate business who were using Qualtrics. I conducted an RFP with all the vendors in the marketplace. We went through a very thorough, what are our needs, what's our budget, what does implementation look like, pros and cons of all the approaches, and just went ahead with Qualtrics. In my previous experience and other roles where I've worked in this space, they're a very well-known quantity. They're a market leader, and it's a very safe choice. So aligning with corporate made a lot of sense too.
When you went through and started to centralize and standardize the different aspects and the different metrics, what were the particular metrics that you were looking for to be able to capture from a group-wide standardized point of view?
Yeah, sure. So I use two metrics for two different outputs. I use Net Promoter Score as our company's brand North Star. So if I'm talking to my executives, I'm interested in them knowing where the NPS is tracking and what are the drivers that are affecting that. Also collect CSAT. I feel it's a more relevant metric at the front line. NPS talks to brand and what happens to your likelihood to advocate for a company or not. But I also want to select your customer satisfaction. We're expressing it as a top one box for being extremely satisfied or dissatisfied with the service that they received. Because that's what's really in control of the consultant at the front end. They don't really impact or control things like price or where our stores are located or our opening hours or anything else that a customer might be encompassed within how a customer feels about brand. We do absolutely collect NPS first to go, how is Flight Centre brand going? And then we also measure CSAT for consultants, and we have questions measured in top two box methodology for our customer value propositions too. So that you offer things like book your way, which is around a sort of omni-channel approach. We want to quantify, are we there and talking to our customers and letting them book with us in the ways that they want to? Likewise, always here for you and your very own travel expert. This is our brand promise. And so we want to measure and understand if we're delivering on that.
Now, I'm assuming the AI portions of the Qualtrics platform were not around when you first did the RFP and did the selection. So what's that added to the picture?
So the natural language understanding that they have now available, they had just acquired at the time we were making that. So they bought out Clarabridge some years ago, and that was exceptionally important for me. Measuring the score is one thing, but if you don't know what you need to do to improve it or change it, then it loses all its utility. Talking with people like Sid Banerjee, formerly Clarabridge, and now Qualtrics, and getting an understanding of its product, it gave me a lot of faith and understanding that was going to help me first categorize and properly understand what our customers are talking about, especially when we have very high volumes in terms of customer comments and feedbacks. There's, I think, a couple of million customers a year. So we needed a tool that could obviously do that at scale and give us that understanding. I believe it has.
So you're using natural language processing, if I understand it correctly, to analyze unstructured feedback that's given out to the organization.
So the first thing that we did, we started building out the program. And to do that, we moved into a foundational place first, which was events occur, customers return from travel, customers interact with us. And we, at that point, identified that as a trigger. The data lake processes a file, sends it to Qualtrics. Qualtrics sends out a survey. And so we are soliciting feedback based on customers interacting with us at points along the journey. And it's largely structured in terms of we're capturing specific metrics. We then, in March, moved to a solicited and unsolicited feedback capture that was structured and unstructured. So by doing this, we are having our Qualtrics surveys flow into the natural language understanding. We're also integrating Sprinkler, which captures all our social media commentary, feedback on their review site comments, and pulls that in as well, and then applies things like sentiment, emotion, effort, emotional intensity to the language so that we can categorize and understand what all these customers are talking to us about. We'd like to pull in Genesis. We've just implemented Genesis, so I'd like our telephony to be able to flow through this into a centralized location, as well as operational data from Power BI, so that we've got a much more rounded picture of what our customers are talking about and be able to really use the natural language understanding to categorize that with good precision and good recall, and then drive under and outer loop activities, either sort of stuff through the things like closed loop and frontline feedback to more strategic and process improvements.
I imagine travel is an area where you're probably not short of feedback. In a sense, it's one of those industries and one of those customer experiences where people tend to share a lot of what happened, good or
Yeah.
bad, with their trips. Do you get more intelligence in this industry than perhaps others?
Yes, I would say there absolutely are much more categories and subcategories of what our customers can talk about. So everyone's still got their journeys, regardless of which company that they're at. But the different things that our customers can talk to us about and the high volume of customers there means that we have a very wide funnel of lots of volume and lots of different comments about different things. How can we then understand those, interpret them, and categorize them so that we can best prioritize what we can do to improve the customer experience?
And what's been your experience so far with the natural language processing side of things in terms of its ability to extract detailed sentiment analysis and to create insights that you're then able to pipeline?
I love it. This intelligence and way of using as a tool has just come so far in the last few years. If I think back to 5 or 6 years ago, like text analytics were there, but to be honest, it was really just a few keywords for rule-based taxonomy. And what I'm seeing now in 5 years' time, I'll probably think it's pretty rudimentary, but for me, it's amazing. The levels of precision and recall, if I look at a topic and then go and look at the comments, I'm finding a huge majority, 9 out of 10 of them are about the thing that the comment is saying. This is what it's about. And to be able to have that gives not just me, but gives everyone in the business that sense of faith when they're looking at the results that they can interpret that and say, I know what I need to do. They're much more actionable and pointed because I think previously, looking at how some of these tools work sometimes, in order to get good precision, it has to be high level, as in they're talking about price. What about price? Not quite sure, but I can safely say that it's about price. Or on the flip side, you can get very pointed, but know that you're not going to capture too many comments within that, or you'll have a high level of inaccurate comments captured within that bucket. So say, for example, you're putting in rules to capture comments that are specifically talking about a product that is specific. So let's say a flight to Berlin that goes via Doha. You'd be very specific about that, which means that any deviation in language from the customer, which probably should have put it in there, you find that it doesn't. And so what Qualtrics's current offering around the natural language understanding is giving really good precision and really good recall.
And do you want to talk a little bit about where the insights go in terms of once you've got these sort of insights gleaned from the voice of customer, does that funnel to like next best action or a next best conversation to have with the customer?
That's probably where we'd like to go, using AI automation to give that next best action, next best outcome in real time. That's more development. So we're not there with that yet. But what we are doing is having regular within the sort of inner and outer loop workings, we have from a sort of strategic level, these are the results we're seeing this month attached to all these different categories. This is their impact on our NPS. This is what's changed. This has gone up, this has gone down, and this is the reason why. And that goes to our leaders to be able to drive that strategic change. And then specifically, information goes to its relevant functions too. I guess I give you a textbook example of how I wanted this to be used and how it is being used. Within one of our categories for online travel, people that purchased online, we saw that they were over-indexed for comments about their seat experience and the seat purchasing, as in not getting the seat that they wanted. So we shared this information with that particular function who were able to go, okay, we're getting a lot more of these particular comments than we thought we would, or would compare to the retail network. Why is that happening? And it allowed them to sort of deep dive and find process issues relating to some specific airlines where customers had paid for a seat and not your standard seat selection, but an extra legroom seat or a near the front seat, which I think most airlines charge surplus for. But this is on some specific airlines, it wasn't being allocated properly. And this was, if I've got tens of customers a month saying this, we know safely based on response rate and what we're not capturing, this is probably affecting hundreds of customers a month. Every year, we're in thousands of customers that are being affected. If we consider their lifetime value, this is millions of dollars over years problem. And it's a bad customer experience, and they're buying something and not picking up and getting that realization of what they purchased. And we're able to fix this problem. Processes have started in place. We saw a 20% drop in these types of comments within the space of 2 weeks, and we were continuing to work on our processes to improve this. And that's the benefit of having people in the business that are getting this information and are hungry to do something with it, and the information being useful and allowing them to do that.
Okay, so if I understood that mostly from a higher level perspective, though, it's at the moment the information is mostly used as a like monthly reporting suite of dashboards and other things for executives. But also, I'm assuming with the example you just gave, though, once you'd recognize that, you would have flagged that much earlier than in real time or as close to real time as possible with the
as close to real time for a human. So it's starting to, when I'm looking at the data in the graphs and the dashboards, and then saying, okay, I'm seeing something here that I'm not expecting to see. So the next stage of the next phase is to let the AI do that. And that's going to require more development. So the first stage is to get the natural language processing in position. And you're like, wow, this is great. It's actually telling me what all these things are talking about and being accurate with it. And then we've got to go, how do we get this into the business and take action on it sooner? And a robot can do it much faster than a human. So that's the next part of our development.
I've come through the questions I had. Is there anything that you want us to get across else, or you think I've missed?
I would just say, I've been talking with Qualtrics, these sort of conversations about the natural language understanding. For me, it's just sort of sharing that the tool has just come a long way quickly. And for anybody that's tried a text analytics tool and it wasn't particularly good, and that might have only been 2 or 3 years ago, the speed with which the technology is moving is remarkable. And it's just something I just say, look, this makes your life so much easier and can deliver a much better customer experience.
That's it for this fortnight's episode. Please let us know what you think by reviewing the iTnews podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you download your podcasts from. Your feedback is appreciated and helps us create better content catered to you, our listeners. And for all the latest headlines and happenings in Australian technology news and all the trends from our State of Data report, visit itnews.com.au.